Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Elizabeth Taylor, and I'm Design Build Consultant for HartmanBaldwin. Today, I'm going to be walking you through today's discussion. Regarding the Lemonade residents, as much of our community has been affected from the Eaton fires, we understand the need for more discussion around building with fire resistance. So today we wanted to share the beautiful and traditional home we constructed within this high fire zone and what that process would look like. And today we have with us, well, for starters, we have Bill Baldwin. Bill is the CEO and design build consultant for the project team. He has a big passion for design and construction, and he'll lead the project team overseeing its development and success. Bill, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Just hi to everybody. Thanks for joining us. And we hope you'll enjoy walking through this project as much as we enjoyed being a part of it.
Additionally, we have Alan. Alan is the project architect. He brings the creative vision to the project. He brings technical expertise. Essentially, he transforms the vision into a real design that can be built for our construction team. Alan, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Well, this was a great project. We had a great team. The house was executed beautifully. The clients loved it, and I had a great time.
Awesome. And we also have Troy. Troy's our construction manager. He has an eye for detail, years of experience. He'll bring all of Alan and our other architects' designs to life, and make sure it also stays on track, on budget, exceeds expectations. Troy?
I concur with Alan. Agreed. Beautiful project. Clients at the end were happy, not only happy, but certainly a part of the team along the way, which helped with its success. So beautiful project and fun. Enjoyed doing it.
Okay. Well, today we're going to discuss the project in more detail. I'm going to hand it over to Bill to give us an overview of what the project program looks like.
Well, it's I think significant to note that these are clients who did another wonderful project with us. They had left the area and came back and decided they missed this area too much and came to us. And unlike the prior project, they had kind of some more specific things that they wanted to do in terms of change of their lifestyle. So we looked at a 5,000 square foot main house in a Hampton style. One of the owners is a significant craftsman technician, can almost make anything from scratch. So there was a collector's garage and a machine shop for him to build things. So it was a stunning project and a connection of a beautiful home to a kind of a museum showcase of wonderful workspace.
Well, to essentially get to that and make it a successful project, we have what we call our process for design build. The rest of the presentation is going to be oriented in this way, so you can kind of see how that's going to build upon one another to create the final project. And we're going to discuss along the way where some of the discussion around building in high fire zone has different levels of discussion. So the first step that we have is pre-design. Essentially, it's the consultation. We understand the program. We go through the design proposal, and we really see if this project is a good fit for both our clients and us. Second, we go through concept design. This is where we dream. We look at the vision and start to put some feasibility to it, understanding existing conditions, estimates, city research, and also the fun of the vision. From there, we take those plans and we move into design development. This is where we figure out the how. We go into more detailed drawings, figuring out how the process can actually create detailed drawings, go to the city, work with electrical, plumbing, elevations, and sections. When we get to ready to issue our permits, we then move into construction. This is really executing the plan. We have construction meetings and project completion. from there. So I wanted to talk about pre-design in this moment, and pre-design, as a reminder, is really project initiation. This is when we first start to meet with the client. And in this case, it happened to be a unique situation because this was a previous client. So Bill, do you want to give us a little bit more context about what pre-design for this project looked like?
Well, I think I mentioned at the very beginning, these are clients who we'd worked with before, and you just saw a screenshot ahead of time of 1929 Tudor that was a magnificent project. We did multiple phases to for this client, and they got to a point in their life where they wanted to make a change. And it was a beautiful project with incredible gardens. The one client who I'd mentioned was incredible at machine shop and fabricating anything. The other client had a green thumb that was so good that I used to joke when I would grow in her presence. So, but she got to a point where that became too much on the project. And the allure of Orange County pulled them away. They went down there, lived for a while, and decided they had to come back here. So they came back to us and said, hey, we want to live differently. A lot of what we do, we don't have the same, but there's some things we want to do that kind of change some of the maintenance of the property. And so they engaged with us to look for properties and to look to build a home from the ground up and in a different style.
So would you tell us a little bit more about what the site selection in this instance looked like? Because my understanding is that you were between different lots, and so that is something we helped with for the selection.
We actually, I think, had looked at a number of lots, and we finally focused on these two. Both of them, I believe, are in a high fire area. I think the most significant difference between the two is one had a little bit more District 1, the one on the left, you can see is a longer rectangle. Its layout for the house and then all that garage and workshop behind it was a little more amenable to that. And the other one was on a bit of a more busy street. So in the final analysis, we went to the one on the left.
Well, this is kind of unusual. When a client comes to us, they usually have a lot, and we try and fit the house within the boundaries of the setbacks and requirements that the local jurisdiction has. In this case, we had client come to us with, we want a house of this size, we want these rooms, these functions. So we had to work backwards and figure out what size lot would work with the program.
And so did you do that during pre-design, or were you going to do that during conceptual design?
No, this was done in pre-design. We had to determine which lots that were available in the area would actually fit the program they wanted. And so that was one way of weeding out some of the other lots. It's like these lots are not large enough to accommodate a house of this size.
Well, then moving into conceptual design at this point, as a reminder, conceptual design is really where we do start to develop those floor plans. So we've taken that site plan and the studies that you found from that review, and you start to apply it to the floor. Can you walk us through what that process looked like for this project?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the same for just about any of our projects. We look at what's there, in this case, just the lot. The way the topography and the lot worked, the way the house is oriented on the lot, that starts to inform us. Well, we can put bedrooms here, garages on this side. We look at the program and look at the relationship between the rooms and the functions of the house. The kitchen needs to be next to the dining room and across from the living room and close to the entry and access to the backyard. We research all of the requirements that the city is going to have for this particular lot, this zone, et cetera, et cetera. And this is where we'll first get an idea that very high fire severity zone is going to inform some of the aspects of the architecture on this. But then once we get all these things sketches and creating a floor plan that we think might meet the client's needs, and hardline that, and then dress it up a little bit with some trees here and there, and show it on the lot, to tip up some preliminary elevations, and meet with the clients and get some feedback.
I want to throw in here, though, just to brag on Alan for a second. that it was impressive how much he nailed the conceptual design from the first go. And that's not always common. And we build in the fact that there's going to be revisions and details. And, perhaps it was, it's a past client. There's a common language that we have. But I have to tell you that we all were wowed by Alan's first design, and the clients were completely blown away by it. There may be some nuances and revisions, but it was kind of a home run right out of the box.
They didn't say anything after that first meeting. I thought, oh my God, what did I do wrong?
It was quite the opposite. They were beaming and didn't know what to say. It was impressive.
Well, do you want to walk us through a little bit more in detail about some of the programming and how you executed that floor plan?
Well, this was designed to be a retirement house for them, and aging in place was definitely a consideration. So most of the functions, the main functions of the house, are on a single level. The garage for everyday cars, kitchen, the master suite. So the master suite's on the west here, and then all the public areas are between the garage and the master suite. Guest rooms then are on the second floor. The extension to the house, the workshop, the display room for a lot of little mechanical models that the client made, and then the collector car garage were placed a little further away from the main functions of the house. During this time, we also discovered that the initial concept was for 6 collector cars. Since it's a retirement home, the client's financial advisor says you shouldn't spend this much money, so we're going to cut back on the program a little bit. So we had to deviate from our initial design, but otherwise it's pretty much what we sketched out initially. So the second floor includes 2 guest suites, each with a large walk-in closet and a bathroom, and then separate, not accessible from that area, but accessible from the workshop, was a kind of parts and storage area up in the attic.
Were there any major takeaways from conceptual design that you felt like helped in your research and evolution of the project as it relates to fire safety, or even just the design itself?
Well, most of the fire safety things were dealt with in materials and details, which we'll see more of in design development. Actually, no, the project went from conceptual design all the way through construction pretty much as we'd envisioned it to start with, which is not always the case.
Well, I also think it's important to note that, and this house is evidence of that you can design in high fire areas, and people have a tendency to think, well, it's going to have to be just this rudimentary box and stucco. And here, this is an example of, and you certainly could do it with a craftsman bungalow as well, that you can design beautiful detailed spaces with kind of rich exterior finishes, and they still can be high fire.
As we do move into design development, to your point, Bill and Alan, do you want to give us a little bit of insight into what some of those architectural strategies might have looked like regarding this project?
Well, this was supposed to have been a Hampton style house, which is a derivative of the shingle style, and it's decidedly East Coast, Cape Cod, that sort of vernacular and tradition. So when we move into design development, the trick is, how do we do this in a very high fire zone? So we're looking at materials that are fire resistant, like fiber cement shingle siding, stucco, stone, and where we actually need to use wood, we'll use heavy timber, large members that char rather than burn up during a fire.
Is there any, even as you're navigating the fire resistance research at that level, are there any requirements from the cities as you're making those selections?
Well, yeah, I mean, so fire resistance on the exterior is one, but then we're required by building code to have attic ventilation, for example. So it turns out that attic vents under the eaves or in soffits are very vulnerable to flame and embers entering. So those aren't allowed in very high fire zones. So we're looking at things like ridge vents, gable vents, and dormer vents for this house, which will be screened with a smaller mesh to prevent embers from entering, and in locations that aren't going to be exposed to direct flame, for example.
And are those required or just, you're making those selections?
Well, they're required in very high fire zones. But the trick here is to make this look like a wood house, wood shingles, wood trim on the windows and gables, wood crown mold under the soffits, and detailing that you would normally see out of wood here are all done with fiber cement, which is a combination of wood fibers and cement, which is the binder in concrete. These are put together under high pressure and then embossed with texture to make the shingles look like they are actually wood. And then all of the detailing on the outside, all the crown moldings, the trim around the windows, are all done out of fiber cement. The roofing has to be Class A. Most asphalt shingles are, particularly the longer warranted materials. So this is like a 30-year roof here, or a 50-year roof possibly on this one. So we're, as we're working through figuring out how to do all these details, that's always the goal here, is to use materials that are going to be fire resistant. And on this house, the front facade is fiber cement shingles, it's stone veneer, and then we went to stucco in areas that aren't as readily visible from the street.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that as well, Alan, that, everything that you see in the pictures outside of, as Alan also mentioned, some of the corbel details that are on the front, again, very large timbers for fire resistant purposes, but all the shingles are a hardy cement, all of the siding, all of the fascia, all of the cornice details, crown details, the front columns, all of that. And where we didn't put that product into play, what we did is we enclosed all of the ceilings, all of the exterior ceilings, all the soffit areas, all of those are stucco. And then what we were able to do is continue the paint, bring the trim around, make it look like it was all part of that trim, and just ultimately tie in, but continue to be very fire resistant.
And we used a smooth texture on the stucco, so once that's painted, it looks like painted wood rather than a sandy finish.
Yeah,
I think it's important to note too that these high fire codes that we're talking about didn't come into place until 2008. And when you look at the houses, the very unfortunate loss of homes in the Palisades and Altadena, the local fires, everything that's going to be built back will be built back to these newer standards. And what was considered a very high fire area, any of the areas that have been exposed to this level of loss are going to be considered high fire areas. So all of those homes will be built back with these level of standards. But as you can see from what we're showing you, they can reproduce a house that was lost in much of its detail just with high fire resistant materials.
And what we hear also questions a lot about sprinklers. Is that something that is suggested to put in at this phase? And what do we feel like they would contribute to the fire resistance?
It's important to note that the fire sprinklers that happen, they're required inside of a house, have much more to do with a fire that starts inside of a house. And that what you're looking at in terms of fire resistance on the outside of the house is, again, having much of a protective envelope and the vegetation that's selected and its distance from the house. So, and there are people now, we have a client who just did this, who are also sprinkling the outside of their house, who live in very high fire areas as well. But typically the sprinkler systems on the inside of your house are meant to mitigate a fire that starts in a kitchen or a garage.
The materials that we're using here, and I should also mention, dual glazed tempered windows are much more resistant to cracking than a regular glass pane. They're all designed to keep fire from getting into your house and into, things that are flammable, curtains, furniture, things like that.
Yeah, certainly the dual pane portion of that is absolutely true. That's such a big factor in something like this.
Right. Well then, Troy, do you want to explain to us sort of how we took all of these drawings and made it the reality, huh? Like,
Done.
just magic, huh?
Rolled
It
them up,
sounds like
rolled
it
them
though,
up.
from what I've heard. I mean, this did go pretty smoothly and easily, so.
You know what, it honestly did. I go back to Bill's comment about Alan, and I said the same thing too. I can't imagine just grabbing a blank lot and a blank piece of paper and being able to draw what he did. So kudos to Alan again on that. If you look at the difference between what we built and conceptual, and it wasn't even because Alan didn't draw it right. It was more because, his banker basically said, hey, cut back on 3 cars to the garage ultimately. And that's the only piece that, ultimately did not go back in. But yeah, the construction process was nice on this one. Again, the team was amazing. The forethought was all there. I mentioned earlier also that the clients were just also amazing. The relationship that we had was great with them. Their input was great. They allowed us to build and do what we needed to do. But the project itself was, again, it was fun. Being in Claremont, where it's at, right off the base of, Baldy Mountains here, it was very rocky area, and the over-X on it was certainly difficult. So removal and replace of the soil to get the right compaction so that we could start on the right foot to start building this product or project, certainly proved to be a little bit of a challenge. There was very large rocks, very large boulders on this place. What was great about it, though, is we were able to keep what we call a balanced site. So most of the boulders that came from the site actually were able to be put towards the back. We were limited on what we could do in the back area without kind of raising a flag to kind of promote additional permit fees and everything else due to and or staying away from this particular area that is in the backyard. But one of the things that came out of that was that we were able to use some of these large boulders within the landscape and hardscape when we're done. We'll see later on in some of the pictures in the backyard where some of these boulders that were, and what you see is the tip of the iceberg. Certainly, they're very large, small vehicles, pale in comparison. So certainly a fun part of it, no doubt.
Well, let me clarify. So by balanced site, Troy, that means that the amount of cut and fill for the house and the grading around the house is equal to each other. So we don't have to import or export soil.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct. And we did have to import a little to make up displacement of some of the large boulders, but for the most part, it was pretty well balanced. So good site.
Speaking of well balanced, now it's my turn to brag about Troy. We have all said many times about this project that it was a perfect project, and we have other projects that are perfect projects as well, but this one specifically was a pretty perfect project. I think it did help that the clients had been through it with us before, so they understood the process and they had a common language about things. But the construction process as well, Troy ran this project just perfectly. We had an office on site. We had routine meetings with interior design, architecture, myself, and Troy running construction. So communication was really perfect. All the decisions were made in an appropriate time. The clients were very helpful in understanding that's impact on its schedule. And so, yeah, we got this thing done on budget, on time. Everybody had a smile on their face. Weekly meetings were fun. So it was it was a great process. But yeah, Troy, you took on a complex project under with a lot of details to it, and just knocked it out of the park, and it was done efficiently and beautifully. So we all look back on this project and talk about not only how much fun it was, but how much we hit every single thing all the way through. It was great. It was really fun to be a part of.
Thank you,
And
Bill.
that site integration is really what I enjoy about working for a design build firm where the architect and the construction part are under the same roof.
Agreed.
Well, I think that's a good segue into taking a look at some of the pictures and getting to see what the result was from all of this. So we have the front of house, and I really just wanted to point out these vents because I know that they served a fire resistance technique. Alan, could you
Yeah,
explain a
so
little
I
bit
mean,
more about what that
it's a
is?
very large attic over the house, and so that requires a lot of ventilation. And so one of the strategies is to move the vents into these dormers here, well away from the perimeter of the house and above the ground, um, so that we don't need, soffit vents, cornice vents, under the eaves.
And they're beautiful too.
That they are.
Exactly. We have this detail point. I wanted to highlight some of the millwork in this project. I know that it had extensive millwork, and it seems to be one of the hardships of the project, if there even was one. So I wanted to hear from you, Troy, your experience.
Yeah, this is a great picture to talk about just that. Again, the lines, and it actually even goes back to the picture prior to this. The windows, one would think by looking at it like, hey, this is all supposed to just tie in. But if you notice the trim that goes around the whole perimeter of the house on the outside, all has to tie in, and that means it all has to tie into the exact spot on each one of the windows as it lays out through this 8,000 square foot home, as well as doors and transoms, and all of that is so important. And on a home such as this, where someone could stand back and simply count how many shingles there are between the bottom of the ground to the window and see a clear difference. I challenge anyone to go up here and look at it. It's beautifully, it was beautifully done. And those lines also transfer into that picture we were just looking at into the interior. So as those windows start and stop on the inside, you can see that same headpiece casing travels throughout the whole house. The wainscot then comes into play. And again, how that transfers through the whole house, turns corners that we're not clearly seeing right now. It's certainly a challenge.
Go to the
We
next
do.
slide. We can show that sort of laser precision across multiple rooms. Yeah. So
There's a
Alex,
perfect example of it right there. Yeah, you can kind of see where you're starting to see into different rooms. You see how it transfers. It ties into the kitchen cabinets. It's one of those lines that just kind of continues throughout the whole home.
Yeah, and
And
this line,
one of my favorite things about this entire process on any job, but specifically on this one, on the millwork, is as much as it can be nailed on paper, and Alan did a phenomenal job, there's a certain ratio and feel, and as you turn corners, to Troy's point, and how various moldings intersect, where all of us would be out there and it'd be unending conversation and staring at it. And there's this thing that seems like it's innate in the universe, where it's like a guitar comes into tune. We would all look at a molding that would hit a column, and we'd talk about it, and we'd hold something up, and we'd all go, there it is. And you can almost taste it in your mouth. It's just right. And so there's a lot of those with this level of millwork and detailing. There was a lot of those conversations between all of us to try to make sure, in a tuning fork sense, is that exactly where that should be? It really came out nicely.
and the client's desire for the Hampton style is what drove all this white millwork on the inside. It's a coastal influence, so there's a lot of white, lots of blue accents in here. It was a lot of fun to work on this. I enjoyed doing the drawings and seeing how beautifully it came out. Thanks to Troy.
Thanks to us. It was a team effort, no doubt.
and I know you mentioned like the windows and the transom details, Troy, as being something that you were pretty proud of on the project. And I thought this image was a really good visual for that. I love how it adds the height and a nice little nook for the client to sit in. It's probably one of my favorite little corners in the home.
And we studied, that's a south-facing exposure there with those transom windows and whatnot. So we studied the overhangs, to make sure that during the height of summer, they'll be shaded by the eaves. So it was all very carefully planned out.
That it was. Yeah. And going back to the comment about the transom windows, the complexity that comes from the transom windows and how they tie into the doors. Think of a door. The door styles on a door are typically anywhere from 4 to as much as 6 inches and even greater. But window sash, the styles on a window sash is substantially smaller.
About half
So
that.
now taking that same size transom and putting it over the same size door, but lining up the mullions and the muttons and making sure that those transfer through from a vertical and the horizontal space. It didn't come easy. So it was, and that wasn't all on me. That was a team effort for sure on making sure that we nailed all of that. And it's one of those views that we'll catch later on in here as well from the outside, again, where you can see, and again, it seems so simple. It seems like, yeah, so what's the big deal? That's the way it should be. And you're right, it should be. It's just not easy to do.
And yet that's the fun. In
The whole
truth,
thing's about problem solving. That's what I
It
say.
is.
Like the entire process from beginning to end is problem solving. It's just how much fun we can have doing it.
So on the western end of this central hallway is the master suite. You can see into the doorway from here. Again, very typical of the Hampton style with all the white woodwork, and that continues all the way through all of the areas in the house.
As we go into the primary suite, I really like this image because it really like hits home for that Hamptons aesthetic that they were looking to achieve. I feel like it really brings it all together, and I love the molding in this room as well.
Yeah, it's very open and airy, and the light, you know, the white paint reflects light, and the way the windows are around the house brings in a lot of light. So it's always refreshing, no matter which room you're in.
I believe we have images of the bathroom as well, keeping with the brightness, but it also has like his and her sides and the walk-in shower. I think you mentioned earlier, Alan, speaking to the aging in place and how that was a consideration here.
Yep, that's curbless showers, so it's fully accessible, door on either side. It's his and her closets. It's an exquisite space. I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, well said.
And then I think the other request was really to get that indoor outdoor living, that California lifestyle, and how this project highlighted the connection to the outdoors.
Yeah, here's a spot that we kind of talked about. This one actually was not painted white, but you know, you look at the soffit areas or on the overhangs where the stucco does continue up, but this one was all done with the, you know, La Habra selected color for the ceilings out here. But again, very high resistant, not, you know, wood shingles or any exposure to those attic spaces as well.
And this space opens directly opposite the front door, and you know, just on the other side of that central circulation access. So again, it's great for gatherings and as well as you know, a casual breakfast in the morning.
And then we have the exterior. So I know that this speaks to what you were talking about, Troy, earlier with lining up of the windows and the transoms.
Yeah.
But also speaking, I think this image speaks really well to the fire resistance of the exterior landscaping as well, and the hardening of the home with the placement of the foliage. Was there any discussion around that at all?
Part of the plan was to have, you know, terraces off the back of the house, you know, access off the master bedroom, access from the public areas of the house, the living room, and from the entry hall. And with the concrete terrace there, that serves as protection from fire as well. So there's very little landscape here, so they can enjoy the views of the yard to the south. And again, that doubles as fire protection.
This also, it was not only fire protection, this was a move they kind of wanted to make to have a more minimalist sculptural kind of landscape and planting features as well. It was a direction they kind of wanted to move in with us as well.
And it looks like that's those rocks that you were pointing to earlier, Troy, from the beginning of construction. That was the only potential hurdle you had,
Yeah.
and you made it a piece of art.
It definitely is. You can see the one on the right, even though it's in the forefront, you can see the chairs and they're substantially further back, and you could just see the mere scale between the two. And there was certainly a couple of, like I said, tip of the icebergs, that's for sure. Certain ones were not moving.
Was that, well, let's go back. We actually positioned that somewhat though.
We did, but it took a
not like
big cat. It took a big cat to position it. It was
We-
not just a bobcat type tractor. We had to get a large cat up there to move that one around. But you are right, Bill. We did. Good memory.
It's important to note, yeah, that we didn't build the house around that rock. We actually.
I was
No,
gonna say, did you just not want to move it? You're like, that one's staying. And then we have really one of the most unique portions of the house. And I think what everybody is, I would love to have one of these, maybe not for cars, but you know, my little workshop. This is the gem of the project. Do you want to speak to what is this very unique garage workspace for the client?
Well, I'll jump in and say, you know, the owner and the owner who's in the workshop and using it, he is, you know, a perfectionist, and there's nothing he does that is not absolutely the best. And all the pencils are lined up on his desk in perfect order at any given point. The pictures you see of the workshop, that's how it looks when he's in the middle of a project. So it's perfect. And so our standards in terms of what we had to do on all the millwork and details, everything on the job had to rise to that level too, because that was what's expected. But it's an incredible creative atmosphere. He builds everything from restoring cars at a large scale down to miniature models. And so it's like walking through an active museum. It was really fun to produce this space for him and to see all the way that he ended up filling it with all of the treasures of his life that he's collected and built.
Well, we had to lay out each of the functions there in the machine shop. You know, the drafting table, each of the milling machines and whatnot, was all laid out very carefully and in close coordination with our client. So this was all planned out. Where are we going to pull pneumatic lines from? What about electrical connections here? We need a 3-phase converter. Where are we going to put that? It was all very carefully planned out and then beautifully executed.
yeah, I agree with Alan. You could see in the picture down below in the lower right, just past the old drafting table, that is, you know, that little island, if you will, a little U-shaped island out there. Like Alan said, we ran airlines out there. That's all set up to have electrical airlines, 220 for all of his specific tools. So yeah, it is amazing. And staying with that lower right picture too, I'm proud to say that we are still amazing friends with these clients, and we'll go by there once in a while to say hello, or he'll have us up or whatever. And there is a door that goes into the house behind that, again, that lower right picture. And I've never been there to his house, and I've been to his house many times, their house, and that door is never closed. That shop is so immaculate that it is just part of the house. Even though it says garage or collector's car garage, it is equally a part of that house as he is. So it's amazing.
Yeah, thing of beauty.
That it is.
Great. Well, as we are getting near the conclusion, we just wanted to recap what some of the 5 takeaways might be from building in a high fire zone. I know we mentioned it as we were going, but I think this just recaps everything really nice of where you might want to look moving forward. Number 1 being fire resistant materials and details, looking at using non-combustible materials, strategic design elements, just anything that can help slow the spread of fire and protect the structure itself. Looking at defensible space, creating a buffer zone between the home and vegetation could help minimize fire risk, as well as fire resistant landscaping, making sure that the selection of the plants and spacing them appropriately can help prevent flame spread from reaching the house. Fire breaks as well, hardscaping elements like driveways, patios, gravel paths, they act as a barrier. Also the sprinkler systems, integrated fire sprinkler systems, inside and interior and exterior, can also help extinguish or control the flame spread. And in conclusion, I just wanted to hear from the team, Troy, Bill, Alan, if you have any final thoughts on, this project, building in a high fire zone and what it meant to you and what you've learned?
I'll jump in, shockingly. I think I want to go back to and underline that I think most people's fear about what high fire means and the cost of the aesthetics or quality. And I hope we've answered that today, that you can do a wonderful job of designing in a high fire area and have a traditional aesthetics or something more modern, and that you're not going to sacrifice by building a home that's up to modern, fire and safety standards.
Yeah, I think this project was a very good example of that. I think it being traditional as well, like maybe you could build, there's a lot of requests for more modern homes that the assumption is that those are more fire resistant, but I think demonstrating that this home can be as fire resistant as, a modern aesthetic is really helpful and encouraging for people that may want to pursue this process.
Well, it's, the fire requirements for the high fire zones are becoming ever more restrictive. In fact, we're working on a project right now, Rancho Cucamonga Fire District, where they're requiring actual computer modeling of a wildfire behavior for the project. Despite all of that, as you've seen, it's possible to build in any number of styles, and including something that looks like it's traditional, wood construction in a very high fire zone, and still come up with something that's what the client wants, and as beautiful as you want to make it. Doesn't have to be a concrete bunker.
Indeed.
Thank you for saying that.
Even though it somewhat is, right?
Yeah, it performs that way, but
It performs that way. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to open it up for any additional questions that we might have. Let's see.
Yeah, here, Christina here. First and foremost, I want to thank all of our panelists for such a wonderful presentation. So Elizabeth, Alan, Bill, Troy, thank you so much for your time today. And I hope all of those attending really found this information helpful. And we have been getting a few questions and we've been answering them as they've been coming up, but I left one here that I think a lot of people are wondering and we've been seeing come up quite a bit. And that is, if we've lost our home in the Eaton fire, is it too early to start the conversation with the builder?
I think I can speak to that. Honestly, we're helping a few families think their way through this as well. And I'd say the first thing is to decide if you're really emotionally ready to take that on. I mean, it's such a loss and there's been so much that people have been through. Making sure that you're emotionally ready to take that next step is probably first and foremost. Secondly, I would say make sure that you have an incredible understanding of your insurance policy and what your rights are in dealing with insurance companies, whether sitting on the right side of the table with them, or if you need other consultation to go down that road as well. And then after that, no, I don't think it's too early. You trying to find a really good team that you can trust in both an architect and a builder. We're a huge believers in the design build process for obvious reasons. We think the synergy of that is great, but it can be done with an architect and a builder as well. But finding a great team that you trust, because this is a relationship as much as it is a product. And especially in a fire loss, I think that puts more emphasis on a trusting relationship and people feeling very comfortable with kind of assessing the loss and understanding how to get your lives back and find people that can help guide you to get through it. So I don't think it's too early, but I think you need to be careful and be honest with yourself about where you are in the process and go into it when you feel really emotionally ready to do so.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Thank you, Bill. And I think that just about covers it. If we've left any unanswered, we'll be sure to follow up directly with our attendees here.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. Really hope the webinar was helpful and gave you some insight into the design build process. I hope you learned something about fire resistant strategies as well. But if you do have any additional questions or would like to learn more, feel free to reach out. We'd love to continue the conversation. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.